Welcome into my humble shop, everyone. Today we're going to do a little bit of a fabrication project. We're going to use our CNC table and a little bit of our CAD CAM designs to build us a custom sign. And then of course we've got to get it all built and TIG welded and a couple other facets to the fabrication process. We're going to be building another one of these signs with a little bit more drama. And don't worry, at the end of it, believe it or not, we're giving these signs away. So stay tuned to the end of this video so you can see how you can win the one that we build in this video. Just as anything else, we got to start off with the design, and I usually have to sketch something out. We are going to go for a rectangle simple sign as well. We're going to be using two 2-inch by 3/16 inch flat bar. This is going to be aluminum. That's going to be the frame that I'm going to use. It's going to be 24 inches and 27 3/4 as far as the dimensions here, and we'll have our 45s welded as you've seen in that other sign. We're going to make two very similar signs as far as the materials that we use. We're going to be using the carbon steel for the actual text. What I'm actually writing on is what the carbon steel we're going to CNC cut out of to get the same texts. So we got our aluminum frame and then our beer glasses that we're going to have over here, maybe on top like we had the other one. We might stack this one off to the side, both out of carbon steel. Instead of just having the wall, whatever's behind it, color it, we're going to back this with a piece of stainless steel. Now we're going to be able to weld the stainless steel to the carbon steel in a couple different spots, but we're not going to really do a good job of welding any of that to the aluminum itself. So we are going to end up bolting the aluminum to the steel and to the stainless steel that's welded all to one, and then end up having to weld these to those. And then we're probably going to add a little bit of a custom flare on the sides with a plasma cutter to get a kind of a live edge look. Maybe do a little bit of heat treat and do some coloring on the beer glasses on this one. The backing of the stainless, instead of leaving it brushed, we might add some kind of textured and pattern on the back to give this one just a little bit more flair. Let's go over to the computer and kind of design all this. At least I'll show you the fastest way that I can to get these types of graphics in so that you can get them cutting as quick as possible. Whoever really knows CNC, because I don't know it that well, CAD or CAM or whatever, they'll probably laugh at this, but let's try it out. As a welder by trade, learning the whole CAD CAM stuff is quite a learning curve. Picking up a laptop and opening up Fusion for the first time was very challenging, and it took some months of learning in order to get where I got. I've got to the point now where I can do quite a bit, at least on a two-dimensional plane. So I'm going to show you all of the things that I do as far as getting some of the images that I need or some of the font or text. First thing you're going to do is type in something that you want to look for. We're going to type in silhouette of beer cheersing. Usually type in a silhouette of something in one way or the other. Silhouette of deer, a skull, silhouette of something, so that you get some kind of a black and white deal. You'll notice we got a lot to pull up. If you just type in the silhouette, you can use the tools and go to black and white to help sort through a few things, and even type in clip art as another option if something needs to get a little bit more specific. What we're going to use is going to be right here. You want to be a little bit selective of what you're trying to pick. This beer glass here, well, it might be cool to cut out. If you cut this circle out, everything in the inside of that is going to fall out, this little rectangle. So there might be some more work involved than you would like. To go back to what we're going to cut out here, this is the image that we've selected. I'd see that there is a clear negative and positive to this image. I'll probably have to get rid of some of those splashes because obviously they're not held on to anything. But if you just right click and hit copy image, God bless them, just hit copy image, and then you just hit paste. And then all you got to do is hit path, trace bitmap. This opens up to the right, and you hit apply. All that's going to do is kind of sort through a lot of that stuff. So now we have the original here. We can delete it and bring in our new copy. Go to the eraser and kind of erase all this junk down at the bottom so that we get everything that we want and our dimensions aren't skewed. Now we can kind of scale it. So we go back to the little arrow here and we can scale our height. We're going to put it in inches and then put this lock mechanism in the top here, and then we'll scale it to, I think we'll just do 18. And if you notice, if we click the nodes in the top left, you can see it's traced out the bitmap for us. It's got it laid out so that we can import it into our CAD software. We'll hit File, Save As, we'll do beers, and then it says Inkscape SVG, or you can scroll down and find one of these DXF things. I used to hit these DXF ones and was able to export it into Fusion with the exact dimensions. I don't know what changed, what happened. Now when I do this, nothing happens. I can't upload it in, but I can save it as an SVG and get close. So we'll save that. and then we'll open up Fusion 360. This was all the work that we did on the previous side. You'll notice I imported some more font, put a rectangle around it. We got it the size that we want to match the frame. I actually do need to widen out the sides here so that the bolts hold on a little bit more. And then we have our backing piece for our beer. After I make this a little bit wider, all I do is go to this top, hit save, and then go down to File, Export. And then I'll export this with whatever name and as a DXF file. Once that has exported, I'll open up SheetCam. Once I got SheetCam open, we'll just go to the new part. We'll just put in the part that we're looking for, make sure the scale is right, we're in inches, and we'll get what we need. This is where things can get tricky. We're gonna go to Operations and Plasma Cut. Being that I'm a fast cut user, they look up all the information needed for the machine. I'm using the ex-trafire by Thermocut. If you look on mine, when it comes down from contour method to layer to tool, we have all these different tools. These are all different settings that we can program into the plasma cutter. We're going to be working on 16 gauge using 45 amps and using compressed air. So that's T17. We're going to click that one. The feed rate is 278. I think we can get away with more like 150. 100 seemed to be a little bit too sluggish. I think we can go a little bit faster. The red lines on the beers versus the yellow lines, the program already knows I want to start on the inside of all of these, and I'm going to start on the outside of those reds. We don't need to do the chain length or overcut, but we do need to come in perpendicularly. In the lead out, we don't need anything. And then all we got to do is make sure we click our plane that we want to be cutting, and you'll see everything turns to white, and all you do is hit OK. And you'll see that you'll have all these blue lines going to each one of your cuts. You might get an error like this, and when you click on it, it'll bring you to it. So this little piece here, something was too small, and it's basically telling me, hey, I'm not going to end up being able to cut that, which is not going to be a big, huge issue for us. Once we have that all done, all we have to hit is the post up here, and we can post that into our files. Woo! And once all that's done, you can go into Mach 3, which is going to be our loader. So I got to turn my table on down there. Mach 3 is what the fast cut is using in order to steer the ship here. I need to get it past its, I don't know why that's locked up. Oh, it's saying that the plasma table's not connected. Slide that off so it doesn't hit that limit switch. That's what I was trying to do. Once you got your table powered on and Mach 3 is open, you can load the G-code that you're looking to do. We're going to be doing beer sign part 1 because we have 2 cuts that we want to make. We have the sign here. You can steer the ship here on the keyboard as well as steering it with this Xbox controller. It's really nice and easy. You can freely move all the way around and control all your axes. But we're looking to get to the corner of this piece of material so that we can obviously use the most of it. And once we've got the corner found, we can zero our axes out, and we got to make sure everything is turned on. We still haven't powered on the plasma cutter, but we've got everything set up on this end. We're gonna be using the ex-trafire 85 HD from Thermocut. We got the program set for 45 amps, so we're gonna make sure the machine is set to 45 amps. We've got the leads plugged in properly. We got our ground on. It's not that complicated. These consumables last a while, but I always like to take them out and check them and make sure that they're in properly. Now that we got all that, we should be good to go and start cutting. We got some dark glasses. We want to make sure we got our zero found. We got the compressor on. We got dry freaking air. We got good consumables. We got the right consumables. These are the only things that you need in order to cut successfully on a plasma table. Dry air, proper amperage for the consumables, and of course your programming right. This thing's nice. I really don't have to babysit it. My older one, it was one that you had to babysit because if you walked away, something wrong was going to happen. But this thing runs all night, all day, no problem, and that's why spending some coin for something nice really does help. Definitely a lot more prep when it comes to plasma cutting on a CNC than it is actually the plasma cutting itself. And you get better at it as far as adjusting your amperages and travel speeds. This might have been a hair fast compared to last time. You know, we could always go up in amps maybe and try to cut a little bit cleaner, but we did okay. There's a couple bits in the program, like this W, could use a little bit better of a start. We'll get all this out and prepped here in a moment. I want to get all this out of here. We still got to prep all this stuff. We still got to make a frame. So I think it's time we just go step over and let's work at cutting up this frame. Now we make our frame out of this 2" by 3/16" thick aluminum flat bar. If you watched our miter cut video on the simple ways of miter cutting material, we used 2" by 2" square tubing. Now the same principles are going to apply to this piece of flat bar. We can go ahead and pull measurements as far as our square lengths, and we can get our overall lengths cut to length, and then we can go about putting it back into the saw, adjusting it to 45, and then making our miters and just clipping those ends. This just involves a little bit more cutting. You involve like 3 cuts instead of 1. We've got our chop saw set to a 45. All we have to do is pull our overall measurement. If you just imagine we just chopped that one, we actually have to make the measurement on the flip side. 24, you can mark it square, and then you can have a good line to follow for where that 45 should be. We don't have to move the saw back and forth. Just open her up, drop that saw down, line it up with our marker line, and tighten her down. So now you only got just the 1 cut every time.
Now we went ahead and just laid these out and drilled the holes for each of our 4 pieces. Found our center, made a little mark, and then found the center of that and used some can cut drill bits to get through these. We just use a bigger bit to get that countersink in there for our bolts we're going to end up using because they don't have a flat back. After we got the holes drilled in there, we're going to go ahead and jig the things up on the fixture table and keep everything nice and square so we can tack everything together. Once you really commit to a finish, like we did with the palm sander, you don't want to be touching it with your hands. You want to use clean gloves. You don't want to be sweating over the top of it. It's going to end up getting on the material and it oxides. Now that we've got it all jigged up, stuck down to the table, we can run over to the weld machine and set up the Typhoon 230 and weld this sucker. Now the frame that we're using is made out of aluminum, so we've got the Typhoon 230 set up for AC TIG welding. I've got the machine maxed out at 230 amps, but I do have a foot pedal control so that I have full control over that amperage. Now aluminum has a really high thermal conductivity, so at the beginning I might be using a lot of amperage to get this weld started, but towards the end of the weld, once the heat input is already into the material, I'm going to be having to use that foot pedal and back off that amperage. I even like to use my torch to give a little bit of preheat into the base metal so that I don't have to have so much time at the beginning to get the weld started, and the weld seems to be a little bit more consistent. But once the welds are all wrapped up, we can set this frame off to the side.
So we'll put the aluminum frame on hold for now. We got to stack these 2 pieces of metal, our carbon steel words with the stainless steel back on the back. Marking where we need to cut it, we'll mark that, we'll trim it just like we did the other one with the cutoff wheel, and then we'll peel back this plastic protective layer. We do want to add a little bit more pizzazz to this one, so this one I'm actually going to take a grinder and then add a lot of texturing and kind of a spiral pattern so that it kind of looks, I don't know, it has a little bit more pop, a little bit more depth to it. After that, we're gonna take the 3M fiber disc. Man, that stuff is really nice for putting a nice clean finish on stuff and getting all the dross off. Once the 2 pieces of metal are nice and clean, we can stack them, clamp them really tight together, and start tacking all the sides. We're also gonna end up drilling a couple of holes into the carbon steel on top of the stainless steel, drilling into that carbon steel, leaving a hole so that we can plug weld in down to that stainless steel so none of the words in the center get too floppy. Put the holes in the steel, bolt it all together, clamp it down, and then we're going to put that live edge on there when everything's nice and tight and not moving. I think I'm in a little bit better of a place now. I can start doing this live edge that I want to put on the side of this frame. I wanted to make this one a little bit more drama. So we got the ex-trafire over here, 45 amps, and with gouge mode set. I'm really going to be aiming for the edge of this. I really don't want to take any length or meat out of this flat bar. I really want to just angle my plasma torch as far over to the side as possible. Got it all bolted up really solid. I just used some countersink bolts that I had from a previous project. They were a little long, so I had to cut them down and kind of make sure that there was no sharp edges on the back side, but they're all shored up. It's all nice and tight, so we shouldn't have any issues. I'm going to come around these corners too at a severe angle, and luckily I'll be able to cut off that nasty stop of mine. But let's see if we can't get it going. I'm going to pull back towards me. Jagged edges is kind of what we're going for. I want to try to get as far back as I can, but without taking any length off. But it's kind of hard to keep this torch lit. Really no method to the madness. other than just trying to just skim the surface, cut off the little corner. That's more or less what we're looking for. We'll get all the way around and then we'll clean it up. I turned my amps down a little bit to 30. I really want to see I don't want to see it dig much. I want to be able to play around on this aluminum and really get into that flat bar a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Just awful cut is all I'm looking for. Ooh, I might just get a little bit deeper in there. Like, check that out. Yeah. That gouge mode. That's nuts right there. That looks crazy. Getting a little bit bowed, but once that aluminum cools off, it should be able to go back to normal. So we're gonna keep it and work on it hot. So the live edge is all finished up. No really idea behind it other than just making it look a lot rougher compared to the nice and clean look that we have over here. I'm gonna set this back here and let it dry. Yeah. And then we're gonna go ahead and grab these two accessories. Beers, cheersing, and the backing plate for it. Now this one compared to that one, all I done is ground off all the mill scale on this carbon steel. That's it. I just ground off the mill scale off of this thing. And then once it was tacked onto the backing plate of this, I could clear coat it. And for the most part, that stuff is gonna stay there for forever, especially if it's an indoor sign. For what we're doing here, I really recommend this being an indoor sign. That carbon steel is not painted on the back side, so if it does end up sitting outside, you'll probably have some rust running or something along that nature. So definitely want to make it an inside sign. However, what we're going to do to these is we're going to shine them up just like we did the beer, but we're going to do both of them. We're going to add some texture behind this one. We're going to take our flap wheel and just pat it around. Pat, 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 and give some swirlies in there, and I really like the way that looks. We're going to shine this one up and just get it a nice even finish and then add a little bit of heat treat to it. And then once that's done, we can tack it together and then it'll look real sharp. I opted to put the Cubitron 3 just regular grinding disc on the grinder now to get this. The backing plate's one thing, but to do this, how that fiber disc can get under these pieces and it'll start to kick back. The important part is we're trying to keep all of our grinding marks going the same direction. So our grinder, we don't want to be grinding all different directions. We have to keep this steady, even, consistent stroke. And then once I get a little bit of that mill scale off or all that mill scale off with this, I'll come back with the fiber disc and then come back with the Scotch-Brite cleaning strip wheel to really put a nice smooth finish on it. The biggest thing that I found with doing carbon steel is definitely don't sweat on it. You drip on it, you're gonna have to grind that spot again and clean it quick. Once it's clean, we wanna get it clear coated on it as fast as possible. Otherwise, rust will start to form. You may not see it now, but if you put, say, your hand on here, like your bare hand right after grinding, and you put your hand down on it, and then you go turn around and then paint it, you're gonna see your hand print. So, nice even grinding strokes, all the same direction, get all the mill scale off, get the finish on there, and get the heat treat on there as quick as possible so we can clear coat it. Now when it comes to heat treating or flame painting, whatever you want to call it, carbon steel, I believe, to have some of the more darker blues and purples if you do it correctly. Now when I say correctly, that means that there's some sort of trick to it, and there really isn't. I think it's more of a patience thing than anything else. We got all these thin bits up here on the top. We won't need to touch those very much because they're thin. That heat's gonna get to it pretty quick. First thing we're gonna do is just make the sheet metal sweat a little bit, get all the moisture out. And I like to start somewhere where it's real thick. And you just kinda, with 16 gauge, you know, and of course thicker, you'll have to wait a little longer. And thinner, it'll happen a lot quicker. You just kinda go about licking it with the torch is what I like to call it. And you'll start seeing those colors start to pop in. It'll start being a little bit of straw colored. That's the first indication of color right there, that little bit of straw. The edges are always gonna happen a little bit quicker, so you wanna keep that in mind. So we're in this spot, you see how it starts to be straw? You gotta be patient because if you just keep putting heat on it, you're gonna pass this purple. See how that purple is starting to grow a little bit? So I'm gonna not put any more heat on that spot because I've got other areas around that to put heat into. And then you just kinda, like if you know you're gonna hit a spot real heavy like I just did, just take that torch off after a second. This is like a heavy hit. Boom, see how blue and how much it's growing? Then you start to see that blue and then that light blue. After that light blue, you pretty much done burnt it up. I think carbon steel has a really nice color to it when you do this, but you gotta remove all the mill scale or get some cold roll, but even still grinding textures and getting that really clean, shiny steel, I think makes that color pop the best. This is completely ground and clean, and now it's got heat into it. It is as most sensitive to oxidation as it could ever be. So we really got to get this now on the back side of it, tacked down, put in. Don't want to scratch anything because you can scratch that off. I don't want to touch that because I know that's hot. We're in the peak Houston summer, man. It's humid in this shop. Got some gloves on, we can slide it in now, and now we can kind of see what we were attempting to get out of this. Ooh, that's real nice. The last one I just welded in. Probably this one's actually going to be given away at FabTech if you end up coming to Orlando in October. We'll give this away during the Arcs and Ales event for AWS. And I think it's a pretty appropriate piece given that we're going to be at a brewery. I was able to just replace the bolts here, put the longer ones back on that I cut off, put some new ones on that I had left over. This was much easier to fasten than have to weld and leave some heat affected zone and all this pretty stuff that I already cleaned up. Now just to finish everything up, we'll put this little piece of 16th inch TIG wire so that you can end up hanging it wherever you want. Just leave that filler in the puddle, get nice and stuck, and then we'll do this side. Grab a little bit of that extra wire that fell off. Try to give it a couple little bits of reinforcement because it's essentially the only thing holding all this stuff up. Good test is just to pick it up and see if you can hold it. Seems like it'll hold. At AWS's Arts and Ales event happening in Orlando, Florida at FabTech. It'll be one of those nighttime events. There's going to be a raffle in place. There's going to be a lot of giveaway items. AWS is always giving back and helping out. This is a fun event to go to, and we'll be giving away this at one of their raffles too. Now you know how you can do this yourself, and you don't need a fancy CNC table. You can do everything all by freehand if you wanted to. Get a projector and put it on a piece of metal, trace it with some chalk or just your own style. And that's one reason why I love making stuff like this, because it's everything that I got up here that I can put onto a canvas, or at least some metal. But hey, thanks for watching everyone. Check out our links down below in the description for all of our trusted partners and deals that you can cop, and see us in Orlando at Arcs and Ales. Some countersink bolts that I had from a previous project. They were a little long, so I had to cut them down and kind of make sure that there was no sharp edges on the back side.
Sharp edges on the back side.
Jagged edges is kind of what we're going for.
Sharp edges on the back side.